Israel's military moving to occupy Gaza City with a new offensive. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, Israel has approved plans to massively expand settlements into areas that Palestinians right now live. It's a move that would effectively cut that territory in half. To help us understand what it means in the context of the broader war, the humanitarian crisis, and the efforts to get a ceasefire, we are joined by Akash Maharaj, who is a senior fellow at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Akash, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Canada is among several nations that are about to recognize Palestine as a state. What does this do to that?
It certainly throws a hand grenade into these discussions, but the effects will vary between states. With France, for example, it's likely not to have an effect. They were very determined about their course of action and will probably carry on down that path. For the United Kingdom, this closes the door that Keir Starmer appeared to be holding open for himself not to recognise the state of Palestine. He had said that he would recognise Palestine unless Israel agreed to 3 conditions. One of them was to abandon any plans to further settlements in the West Bank.
And they're going ahead with more.
They are accelerating them. So he will be compelled to carry through on that commitment, despite the fact that he did seem unenthusiastic about it. For Canada, the effect is somewhat more complex. Our Prime Minister said that Canada would recognise Palestine if the Palestinians agreed to 3 conditions. That included, for example, unspecified reforms to their governance, elections next year in which Hamas would not be included, and finally, demilitarising the Palestinian state. Under the best of conditions, the Palestinian government, which controls very little of its own territory, had little capacity to meet any of those conditions.
But my understanding is it wasn't a requirement to meet them, but a promise to do them.
And certainly with the elections, for example, that he demanded them by 2026. But their ability even to pursue those goals will be further impaired by the fact that they will have no effective control over their own territory.
I mean, that is a question about the broader process, that if you have nations around the world that are saying Palestine is a state, but it is an occupied state or an occupied territory, what is the prospect going forward?
When asked why Israel was proceeding with these plans, Bezalel Smotrich, the Israeli Minister of Finance, said quite bluntly, and this is a quotation from him, the Palestinian state is being erased from the table, not with words but with actions. In effect, what they are saying is that the world can say what it wants, but the government of Israel will do what it wants. That the recognition of Palestine by Canada and other countries will be a sterile political gesture, because through these actions, the Netanyahu government will ensure that Palestine cannot exist in fact.
Is there broad support for this in Israel? I mean, we see the Netanyahu government and some particular hardliners inside that government are behind it, but is there support for this in Israel itself?
Like so many things in Israel, it is highly controversial. It is far more controversial than the prosecution of the war to defend Israel against Hamas. To give you an example, when the war first started after Hamas' attack on Israel, the Israeli government called up about 360,000 reservists. That is the largest mobilization of the reserves since the Yom Kippur War in the early 1970s. Virtually everyone responded to that call. In the new declaration that the Netanyahu government will create new settlements in the West Bank and will fully occupy Gaza City, the Netanyahu government has set up 60,000 reservists, which is part of a larger call-up of 250,000 new reservists. A full third of Israelis have refused that call. About a third of Israeli reservists have simply refused to turn up. Still, that means 2/3 have turned up. But Netanyahu is now moving from the prosecution of a war that had not only domestic support but international support into tactics that have no support internationally and less support domestically.
Israel has defended its actions in part by saying that they intend to eliminate the Palestinian population's dependence on Hamas. How would they do that?
That's a very good question. In effect, the Palestinian people have no legitimate government. The Fatah government in the West Bank and the Hamas government in Gaza are now 19 years into a 4-year term of office. The Palestinians have not been permitted to hold elections, both, it must be said, by the Palestinian authorities themselves, who kept cancelling elections whenever they saw that they were going to lose those elections, and indeed previously by interference from the Netanyahu government, who my conclusion is, did not want to see the emergence of a truly elected and therefore legitimate authority in the Palestinian territories, out of fear that if the Palestinians gained a strong and effective government, they would turn that strength against Israel. Is Netanyahu cutting the West Bank in half and fully occupying Gaza City for the benefit of Palestinians? Absolutely not. He's doing this because it bolsters his political standing and he believes it will make the Israelis safer. But in the long term, there is no safety and security for the people of Israel without safety and security for the people of Palestine, just as there is no safety and security for the people of Palestine without a safe and secure Israel.
We've heard from Western Europe. We've heard from Canada. We know where the United States stands and continues to have a very pro-Israel position. Let me ask you about Israel's neighbors, its Arab neighbors. They're seemingly very silent on this. Why is that?
Israel's neighbors are united in their dislike of Israel's policies and equally united in their unwillingness to actually help the Palestinians. I would say that the Palestinian people are some of the most isolated people in the world because they are beset on the one hand by the fear and enmity of their neighbors in Israel, and they are beset on the other side by the relative indifference of the neighboring Arab and Muslim states. Those states are not democracies. Those states are not responsive to their own population. It would be self-deception to believe that they are going to reach out and provide genuine humanitarian care to the Palestinians when they have withheld that care from their own populations. This is a conflict where there are no heroes. There are only victims.
There are some Israelis who would like to see all Palestinians pushed out of the lands that they now live on and pushed out to other countries. Setting aside for the fact that that would move them off territory they consider their home, would their neighbors even take them?
In a word, no. The neighboring states have, for both domestic and political reasons, been resistant to seeing millions of people, of refugees, flooding into their countries. Jordan has the largest Palestinian refugee population, and that is not without its controversies. I would ask you, if 2 or 3 million Palestinians suddenly applied for refugee status in Canada, do you imagine that Canadians would say yes? Why would one expect the countries around Israel and the Palestinian territories to say yes? The hard reality is you're right. There are many people, especially the ultra-nationalists in Israel, who say they just want the Palestinians to leave, but the Palestinians have nowhere to go.
Is there anything that can happen, in your mind, in your assessment, that will end everything happening there?
In the short term, Netanyahu's decision is one of throwing down the gauntlet to the international community. In effect, he knows that he's being condemned by the vast majority of states, but he's saying, what are you going to do about it? And the answer, by and large, is we are going to protest with words and remain silent with deeds. The only people who have the capacity to change the status quo right now are the people of Israel themselves. And there is great debate and dissent within Israel about the path forward. Don't forget, Netanyahu, prior to the Hamas invasion, was wildly unpopular. Israel was seeing the largest protest in its history. And Netanyahu, as of the month before last, was in court facing corruption and bribery charges. His government is in many ways hanging on by a thread. And it's difficult not to see the domestic angle to this. That is, he feels that he can continue sustaining his government the more he takes a hard line with the Palestinian people. But more and more Israelis are disagreeing. More and more Israelis are afraid that he is sacrificing not just the lives of the Palestinian people for his political ambitions, but also the lives of the remaining Israeli hostages and their prospects to live in peace. This, like so many conflicts, though it is an international conflict, is a conflict that will be decided by domestic constituencies. I think that Netanyahu is taking a great risk, not just with the lives of the people, of the Palestinian people, but a great risk with the tolerance of the Israeli people. In the end, I think that he will be pulled down by the Israeli electorate. The only real question is how many people will die between now and then.